Hey folks, I'm gonna do this again. I filmed this episode earlier, but I felt like I was rushing through it just a little too fast, and I wanted to make sure that I took my time and it didn't feel like I was just packing everything into as short a time as possible. But as you all know, as a fan of older Olympus DSLRs, especially the ones with Kodak CCDs, I'm always on the lookout for top-notch specimens for testing and for daily use. I recently came across an E300 that was in almost perfect condition, and I got it on eBay. Now, while I already owned one that I've had for several years now, the price and the condition on this one was just too good for me to pass up. It was in near mint condition, had all the socket covers and the hot shoe cover, and it only had about 530 shutter actuations. That's pretty good for a 22-year-old camera. The price was just as nice too at 110 bucks, especially since it came with a 40 to 150 kit lens in similar condition. To me, that price is a steal considering what you get with an E300. In the beginning of the E series cameras and lenses, Olympus partnered up with Kodak to make the sensors for all of its cameras. Now, that includes the 8 megapixel KAF, the 8300 CE full frame transverse CCD. It's a lot to remember. The E300 was the second DSLR in Olympus 4/3 lineup. That same exact sensor was also used for the Olympus E500 as well. Now, from the same family of sensors as the original Olympus E1, the Kodak sensors, they're highly regarded for their tonality, beautiful color science, and the overall image quality. It's been suggested by many that the Kodak sensors offer a more filmic look to images as well, but that's a subjective thing, so you have to decide for yourself. Personally, I love the images I get from these Kodak sensors, and that was one of the factors that got me hooked on the E1 originally at the start of my journey with Olympus. However, along the way, I have noticed with the E1 that scenes with a lot of details like landscapes seem to be a little mushy at times. That could be a result of the less resolution of the 5 megapixel sensor or the especially strong anti-alias filter that's in front of the E1 sensor. As much as I love the E1 and still do, there's no denying that images from the E300, the E500, and the E400 seem to be a bit crisper with details being more fully resolved, but those cameras still suffered from some of the same issues as the E1. As this video goes on, I'll throw up some images from the E300 just so you can see the types of images it can produce, though processing will vary from photographer to photographer. Now, you may see some of the same subjects in different photos, like churches or bridges. That's usually because I tried different lenses for the same scenes. So if some images have a different look or feel to them, it might not necessarily be the camera, it could be the lens instead. Now, for some reason, I have seen more videos on YouTube about this camera than any other Kodak CCD Olympus camera. All kinds of channels like Lucy Lumen, Snappiness, 1 Month, 2 Cameras, Robert D. Donato, Stephen Heisel, Mr. 50mm, Colt Matoka, David Cools, and several others have highlighted this particular little gem. There's just something about the E300 that appeals to a wide variety of photographers. The E300, right here, is a fun and quirky little DSLR that's different than most other DSLRs from Olympus or any other manufacturer. It has a boxier shape, and it does not, as you can see here, have the pentaprism hump that you'll find with most DSLRs. Instead, it uses what's called a poro mirror mechanism that has the mirror flip from side to side instead of up to down. Okay, and actually, I'll go ahead and show you how that works, just so you know what I'm talking about here. If you can see this here, I'll turn it on, and now watch this mirror. It's flipping from side to side. That's unusual because most DSLRs will have the mirror flip up and down. Well, the mechanism they designed causes the viewfinder to be shifted over. Let's see if you hear, shifted over to the left-hand side of the camera instead of straight in the middle. Now that's kind of cool for me because I'm a left-eyed shooter, and that works for me a lot better than the standard viewfinder that you'll find on most DSLRs. So something unique about it that you're not going to find with many other cameras. I'll tell you what we'll go ahead and do is we'll go ahead and start with some of the features on the camera. The power switch is in a proper place on the right side, and one can easily turn on the camera with just a flip of the thumb. And just for example, right here, I don't know how much you can see, but right there's the power switch. So you can pick up the camera right hand and you can flip it on, flip it off with relative ease. Now, the E300 includes the same supersonic wave filter cleaning system as the E1. What that is each time the camera is turned on, the sensor vibrates at a very high frequency to shake off dust. Down at the bottom of the chamber, there's a little sticky piece of tape that kind of collects that dust. The E300 uses the same BLM1 batteries as the E1, and I tell you what I will do. I will go ahead and now this is an aftermarket third party battery, but these were the BLM ones that were originally designed for this. Later on, the BLM5 batteries came out, and they were designed for the E5. It's the same voltage and everything, but the BLM5s just had more capacity, so they were backwards compatible with the older cameras. Now, when all of the old Olympus batteries and the third party batteries are no longer available, there's another little device you can use that's called the LBH1 battery holder. And this is kind of nifty here. I've got it in an old Olympus box. I will bring it out. Now this is kind of cool. I'll flip it over. Okay, as you can see, it's kind of hollow inside. What you do is you open this up and you can put in 3 CR123A batteries, and then you just feed this into the camera like a standard battery. This gives you a way to power all of these cameras from Olympus, if all of the old batteries, eventually go dead, or you can't find the third-party manufacturers, or you're out and about and the only thing you could do is buy batteries from Walmart or someplace that you're shopping at. This little thing here will come in handy, and it wouldn't hurt to keep a couple of these inside your backpack. I bought a few of these just to have, sort of a doomsday type scenario where I don't have any other options. I'll have these, and I'll be able to buy CR123s and use those instead. Now, the ISO range for this camera here is 100, 200, 400, and a boost mode at 1600. You don't get the extended range of 3200 like that was available in the E1. I think part of that is this was more of an enthusiast camera while the E1 was a pro camera, so that's why the E1 would give you that extended range of 3200, but nobody really wanted to use it anyway because the ISO noise was just so bad. Drive modes on the E300 include single and continuous, and continuous gave you 2.5 frames per second. That's a blazing fast speed there. It does give you bracketing that you can do, and we'll talk about that. You get a 2-second timer and also a 12-second timer as well for landscape shots or things like that, or maybe, selfies if you want to do those. Compact flash cards are the storage medium. And on this camera, there's only one card slot. And as you can see here, I'll pull this out. Now, this is an older SanDisk 2 4 gigabyte card. But you have to be careful putting these in because sometimes there's an issue with bent pins. But this here has only one card slot. Okay. Now, this 4 gigabyte card that's in here has enough room for 290 RAW file images. If you're shooting both RAW and super high quality JPEGs at the same time, you can shoot right about 200 different images, but you'll have 2 file types for each image. Then you also have other file types like TIFFs and lower quality JPEGs if you want to shoot those. Now, for a camera that was made in 2004, shooting 2 types of images at the same time was quite the feat for an enthusiast level camera. Usually that was something that was reserved for pro level cameras. Now the E300, unlike the E1, has a pop-up flash for those that want to use it. I rarely make use of it, but I have on occasion. I think, and I'll go ahead and show it to you right there. That's it. It kind of comes out with a little bit of force, pops out. There's some people, they kind of try to dampen it a little bit because they're worried that it's going to snap out and eventually the spring's going to give out or it's going to break or whatever. Like I said, I don't use it that much, but I know a lot of people are into that old vintage vibe, point and shoot type, red eye, party mode, and all these things. And that's kind of seems to be making a little bit of a comeback with some photographers. I don't really care for it myself, but it's there if you need it. Never hurts to have it, I guess. Now, as far as metering goes, there's a spot metering mode, center weighted mode, and then there's the digital ESP metering mode. And that's what I use probably 99% of the time. And that mode actually factors in background for the exposure calculations as well. There is a noise reduction feature in this camera, but it's old technology. You might be better off using noise reduction in your modern post-processing software. It's going to do a much better job than this old tech that's in this camera. Now, as far as bracketing goes, this E300 offers both AE bracketing and white balance bracketing in the menus. The AE bracketing might be useful because it's easy to blow the highlights with, this family of sensors. I find, so it wouldn't hurt to have that in there. I don't usually use the white balance bracketing. I mean, it's pretty much useless to me because I can go into, I shoot raw, and I can use the raw files and I can post process and everything, and I can change the white balance pretty quickly. So I have to worry about that. But for those that shoot JPEGs or TIFF files, you might want to use the white balance bracketing because, changing that is much more difficult in those types of files than it is with raw files. Now, there's only a couple of ports on this camera here, and I will show you. Right here is one port, and that's more of your power port. And then right here, you have a mini USB port along with a video out port. Both of them are kind of secured under rubber covers. Should be pretty weatherproof, not as much as the E1, but it's pretty secure. Now, the E300 has 3 AF points right across the center of the grid. So focusing and recomposing will still be a thing for a lot of your pictures. There is an exposure lock button on there, so that will help you while you're doing your focus and recompose because sometimes, you'll get your focus on an area maybe has a bright area like a sky or something, and then when you bring it back down, then your exposure would be different. Well, the exposure lock will help you solve that problem when you're doing that focus and recompose technique, and it's pretty much a requirement with only 3 AF points in the center of the image, so pretty helpful. Now, there's an info button on the back of the camera. That info button is right here. That lets you review specific information about each image that you're reviewing. Each time you press it while an image is in playback mode, you will get different information, including camera and lens settings, date and time, and you'll even get a histogram as well. So that's kind of useful, and you can set it where you want to see a specific type of information the most, or you can change it up every time that you shoot. Now, the E300 has a mode dial, and then it also has one control dial to make adjustments to shooting parameters. And I will show you what these are here. This is your mode dial right here. You can see that. This right here. And then this is that right there is kind of your control dial. Now, the control dial, there are two different things here. Has the mode dial and the control dial. The mode dial lets you use different settings like aperture priority, shutter priority, also manual, so forth. So your photographers with a little more experience can use those modes. Then there's a few settings in here with little pictures, little icons on them that, you can do portraits, landscapes, or you can do macros or sports. Now, those are kind of general settings. Every situation's different. Every situation is going to require very specific types of settings to get the picture that you want. These are kind of starting points for you. But what this mode dial also offers is what's called a scene mode. Now, the scene mode is it's kind of interesting for those people that don't have a lot of experience with advanced settings and so forth. What they what they can do is they can set this dial here and on scene, and then they can come back here and they can look at this screen here, and that screen will give them 14 options. And those options can be high key, museum, snow, beach, documents. It gives you 14 different options. So it's a little bit more granular control, but it still doesn't require the person to have advanced experience with all of the settings. So the Olympus provides you with a lot of guidance, even though you might not have a ton of experience. Now, as far as changing your settings here, there's you've got a ton of buttons on the back here. All right, and what you'll do is anytime you want to say you want to make a change to like your exposure compensation or your metering type or your ISO, you have to press one of these buttons and then a menu will pop up on the screen. And then once you see that, you use this main dial here to adjust the settings. It I don't like that quite as well as the E1. The E1 was it was pretty intuitive. Everything was like within reach of the thumb. To come in here, I have to study the back of the camera, and if I'm trying to find something, I'm like, oh, okay, well, there it is, and then I'll change this, and it's not as intuitive as the E1 is for me. But the menu system is very simple and organized. The thing that I like most about the camera here is the format card option is available immediately on the first page that's offered when the menu is open. Sorry for hitting the mic. If I hit menu here, hang on 1 second here. Let me change this back. Menu. I don't know if you can see that, but it says card setup. First thing that's in the menu that you can see, and I love that because that's probably the thing that you do the most often whenever you're taking pictures. This makes it quick and easy to get to the card, get it ready for taking photos, rather than having to dig down through the menu to find the format option like you do on a lot of cameras. Now, in the menu, you can change other settings, including like one-touch white balance, flash compensation, and if you want, you could set the E300 to take sepia or black and white images. You can also change things like date and time and how long the review time is for each image and whether the camera beeps for focus confirmation as well. Now, as I talked about earlier, the top mode dial gives you plenty of options and control as to how you want to take your images. And experienced shooters and inexperienced shooters alike can take advantage of all the options that are there. You just have to become familiar with everything that's in there and that's available to you. Typically I was with a camera like this, I'm usually shooting, aperture priority most of the time. This is not the best, fast action camera, so I'm usually not using shutter speed and so forth. But there's a lot of options there for both advanced and inexperienced users. You just have to kind of dig into it and see what's best for you. Now, as far as ergos and build quality go, when you compare the E300 to the original E1, there are some immediate things that you'll notice and some not so immediate things. First, the E1 has a much more professional and ergonomic body shape and interface. And there's a reason for that. It's a camera and it feels like it as well. Now, while this E300 sports a metal frame and it feels really, really solid in the hand, it is not built as robustly as the E1 is. Of particular note is the E1's weather sealing and its gaskets and so forth. The E300, while it's well built, does not sport any real weather resistance since it was built more as an enthusiast level camera and not a pro camera. Now, the E300 is a chunky little beast, though with the right lens, like the 25 millimeter f2.8, it could be carried in a large coat pocket, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a pocket camera. Despite that, the E300 is big enough to be carried with and support some of the more standard 4/3 lenses, like the various kit lenses, the 11 to 22 like I have right here, the 14 to 54, the 12 to 60, the 50 macro, and even the 50 to 200 with the right technique. However, for those that would like a little more area to the grip for bigger lenses, including the 50 to 200 and the super high grade lenses like the 35 to 100 or the 150 f2, there is a battery grip called the HLD3, and this is on my other E300, and that can be attached to the E300. And what it does is, well, it does two things. First, you can put two batteries in this. Let me open this up here. I got two batteries right here, and that provides you extra battery capacity so you can shoot for a much longer period of time instead of just on one battery. But the big thing the grip is really good for is it gives you a little bit more area down here to where you can get that pinky finger in here, and it gives you a lot more leverage to hold this with larger lenses like the 150 f2 or the 35 to 100. And I currently, I keep this battery grip on this E300 all the time for those times that I want to use those larger lenses. Like right now, I've got the 7 to 14. It's not super long, but it's kind of a chunky, heavy lens here. And that extra room there for the pinky to grab onto, extra leverage, makes it much easier to hold this for a long period of time throughout the day without having my hand or arm get overly tired. Now, usually on my longer lenses, like the 35 to 100 and the 150, I will typically keep those on my cameras like my E5s or my E30 that have image stabilization on them, but I'll use them every now and then with the E300 just for testing and so forth. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the image is taken with the Kodak sensor on the E300 and the other Olympus DSLRs. They had their own pleasing color profile straight out of the camera. Back in the day, Olympus was known for its JPEG engine. I still like to process my own RAW files, though, but a lot of people prefer just to go the easy route and shoot JPEGs. Either way, the tonality is very rich, and whether it was the sensor itself or the color science behind the processing, there is no denying the appeal of the images when they're taken in good light. Things get iffy, though, when you creep up into higher ISOs, with grain that's apparent at just ISO 400. Some folks capitalize on this grain by converting to black and white for a more organic and classic look, but you have to bear in mind that super clean images are really only going to come out of this at, ISO 100 or 200. Beyond that, you're going to start seeing some noise. Now, what really drives the beautiful image quality of the E300, at least in what I think about it, is really the excellent lenses that are available with the E300 and the rest of the E series. The lens lineup wasn't very deep because it was only around for 5 to 6 years, but most of the lenses that were offered had superb optics, except maybe the very cheap kit lenses. I'm kind of a snob, and I've never even mounted a kit lens. I opt for lenses like the 11 to 22 and the 12 to 60 and the 14 to 35, which the 14 to 35 I like a lot, and I just did a video about that, talking about why that's my favorite lens right now. You might want to check that one out. I have tried the 50 to 200 and the 35 on the E300, mainly for testing, but usually I will leave those lenses on those other bodies I talked about, the E30 and the two E5s, just because those have image stabilization, and it gives me that few extra stops of steadiness, in low light situations, so I can keep those ISOs a little bit lower, if at all possible. Now, I have very recently picked up a Sigma 50 millimeter 1.4 and a Panasonic 25 millimeter f1.4 that I've been trying on the E300 and the E500. I don't yet have enough images from those lenses to form an educated opinion about them. I'm really liking the Panasonic lens so far, just from what I've seen so far. But time will tell, and besides, the fun is actually getting out there and taking the pictures. But I'm sure I'm going to be back around with those lenses and kind of give you my thoughts, share some images and so forth, and tell you what my overall impression is of those lenses on the different 4/3 bodies. So, To start wrapping up about the E300, I guess I could cover a few things that I like and a few things that I don't. I like the quirky body style. It's unique, it's different, it grabs people's attention. It's not something that you see commonly. It's not the most ergonomic design, but it's still fun to hold and to use. And like I say, I shoot with my left eye, so the Poro Prism design that puts the viewfinder over on this side is a much better location for me. I do love the images I get from the E300 with the best glass that I have. People say the images look like film. I'm not sure what that means these days, but there's definitely something about the images that strike a chord with me. Now, despite not being weather sealed, I still like the chunky heft and solid feel of the E300 with its metal frame. It feels like a proper tool and not a toy. And I haven't had any issues. I've had it out in some weather and I haven't had any issues, but it's just not as weather resistant as the E1 or the E5 or the flagship bodies. I do love the native lenses and that I can use with the E300, and it's the lenses that motivate me as much as anything else to keep picking up E-series cameras. Now, what I don't like the noise that gets into the images, even at the lower moderate ISOs, but that's just a fact of life with this family of sensors here, and it's something you have to work around and get used to. The E300 is a great camera for a beautiful day in the park or a beach or a carnival, but not for a moonlight stroll on the boardwalk. Now, the base image files, even the RAW files, hit Lightroom Classic with a heavy magenta bias with this E300. It doesn't do that with the E1 or the E500 or the E400. I don't know why it does this, but the E300 all the images when they come into Lightroom look really pinkish. They have a pinkish tint to them. So I have to dial back the magenta on it just to get it to look right to me. So if you get into looking at some of these files and you see that, you see that kind of pinkish hue, maybe you'll take a look at that magenta setting and dial it back, and maybe you'll get something that you like a little bit better. Now, I do not care, about how you change the settings on this. I don't care for it at all. The ISO, the metering, all these things. I guess part of it is it's just not as intuitive as the E1, but I haven't used this camera as much as I used the E1 over the years. So maybe if I had, I would be more used to it. But like I say, right now, every time I want to change something, I have to pull the camera out and I gotta say, okay, here where's the there it is. And then, it's not intuitive. I want to be able to, change things while it's still up to my eye. And I could do that with the E1. This one here, I've got to bring it out and stare and find it and then look at the menu, then hit the command dial. And it's, it's just not the best process in the world, but it is an enthusiast level camera. So yeah, kind of got to give it a pass on that. Something else that I don't like too much is this little control dial here. That turns way too easy for my taste, especially when I'm trying to change parameters and so forth. I wish it offered a little more resistance to keep me from overshooting the mark when I'm using it to change things. But, that ship has sailed already since the company's gone, the system's dead, and there's nobody to complain to anymore. There's a few other things that are a little wanting on this camera. I mean, there's only 3 AF points and it only does 2.5 frames per second. But again, you have to consider what the price point was, the time, what year it was, what was available at the time. That's just that's just part of what you got back then. And for that kind of money, an enthusiast level camera, those were the kinds of specs and things that you got. It's nowhere near what's offered today on modern mirrorless cameras. But this camera here, I don't use it for sports and things like that, and usually not too much with wildlife. But I don't really use it with anything that's fast moving. This is more of a deliberate camera that I take out on the street and so forth. Maybe do some portraitures, some cityscapes or things like that. So I'm okay with the 2.5 frames per second because of the types of images that I take with this camera. I would say that if you'd like to try out a fun camera that sports a legendary Kodak CCD sensor, then give the E300 a try, provided you understand its limitations going in. If you're a patient, You can find one in excellent shape for, I don't know, 100 to 150 bucks. And you can find some that are beat up a little bit for even cheaper than that. Luckily, there is a resource online that guides users on updating the firmware on some of the older DSLRs like the E300 and the E500. And I'll include a link to the website and the YouTube video about that in the description or maybe in the comments in case you'd like to update the firmware on yours once you buy one. Speaking of the E500, if you're looking for a camera with a more conventional body style, then the E500 uses the exact same sensor and has nearly identical specifications as the E300. In fact, it is so similar that just about everything in this video applies to it. And I don't know if I'm going to do a separate video on it or not. I probably will. The only real difference is the shape and the size and the fact that the E500 has two card slots, one for XD and one for compact flash. Plus, the E500 doesn't feel quite as solid as the E300, but everything else is pretty much the same, especially under the hood. But if you're interested in a video about it and seeing images from it, just let me know in the comments, and I'm sure we can do something on it down the road. I hope you enjoyed this overview on the Olympus 300. Now that we're well past the 30-minute mark, I've still got plans to cover 4/3 cameras and individual lenses in the months ahead. If you like the content and you want to see more along this line, I would appreciate it if you hit the like button or the subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to me in being able to get this information about this fantastic line of camera bodies and lenses to as many people as possible. Thanks for spending your time with me, though, and I'll talk to you soon.